Our next session is on creating leaders. The moderator for this session is Susan Sarfati, CEO, High Performance Strategies of the Limited Liability Company. Susan, can we have you up on stage, please? And Mrs. Arlene Pietranton, Chairman of the ASAE. Arlene, could we have you up too? The next panelist is Mr. Vikram Kumar, Professor, Center for Applied Research in Electronics, IIT. He's the former director of the National Physical Laboratory and an emeritus professor of the IIT Delhi. He was recognized as the Distinguished Materials Scientist of the Year 2012 by the Materials Research Society of India. He is currently the coordinator for the Nanoscale Research Facility at the IIT Delhi. Dr. Kumar is the chairman or member of numerous committees. He is involved with several professional associations. Our last panelist for this, I'm sorry, we have two more. Our next panelist is Mr. Vijai Prakash Agrawal, ex-chairman, Airport Authority of India. Mr. Agrawal till recently served as the chairman of the Airport Authority of India for over 5 years. The Airports Authority of India is an autonomous body created by an act of Indian Parliament. Mr. Agrawal holds a Master of Engineering in Power Electronics and Electrical Drives and a Bachelor of Engineering from Roorkee. He was honored as Distinguished Alumni by the IIT Roorkee. Our last panelist for this session is Mr. Daljit Singh, President of Fortis Healthcare Limited. Mr. Singh has led the company's strategy and organizational development function, as has also held the office of the CEO. He has over 38 years of management experience. Beg your pardon. Mr. Singh is an acknowledged expert and thought leader in the domain of healthcare delivery. He is on the steering board constituted by the World Economic Forum to guide two major global projects, Scenarios for Sustainable Health Systems and the Healthy Living Charter. He is also on the forum's advisory board on the economic burden of non-communicable diseases in India.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's really a lot of fun to be following the session that we just followed, but we have such an illustrious panel that I know we're going to capture your attention. This session is very, very different than the ones that we have had because we won't be dealing as much with the issues that you are facing within your association, like taxation and advocacy and growing membership. We were challenged by William on the first morning to come away from this conference with some real learnings. And what we want to do in this session is to focus on ourselves and our role as leaders in our organizations. So everybody listen, including the front table here. We would like to talk about your role as a leader. So if you could take a moment to separate yourself from the tasks that you're doing on a day-to-day basis and think about yourself as a human being, how you're relating to other people, and what kind of leader you are, and what kind of leader the association community needs, and what kind of leader our world needs to get out of the insanity that is facing our world today. So if you Google the word leadership, you'll get hundreds and hundreds of thousands of definitions. I Googled a legend in your country, Mahatma Gandhi, and I looked up what his definition of leadership is. And of course, there's so many quotes that he made. But he said, I suppose leadership at one time meant muscle, but today it means getting along with people. So leadership, in your ability as leaders, has to do with how you relate, first of all, to yourself. having degrees of emotional intelligence about who you are and what kind of person you want to be, and also how you relate to other people. So I'm not going to try to define leadership, but when we think of leaders, we always think about somebody that has a vision, somebody that inspires other people, whether they are a soft, quiet personality or an outgoing personality. They inspire others to follow. There's a lot of talk about leadership and management. What is the difference between leadership and management? And a very famous writer about the subject says, leaders do the right things, managers do things right. So managers are doing things, or the role of managing is actually doing tasks. Leaders are looking onto the future. One other story, or a story that I'd like to tell you about leaders, the organization that I was CEO of had a speaker series where we invited famous people who were presidents, prime ministers, people that were top in whatever field they were in, whether they were Nobel Peace Prize winner, scientists, entertainers. This lasted for 13 years, 4 times a year. Some of the people that spoke were President Clinton, Margaret Thatcher, Bono, the famous scientist Stephen Hawking. And each one of these people, and we had over 150, were asked to talk about themselves as leaders. And every single one of these people said that they think of themselves as ordinary people who learned how to relate to others. They're people who work really, really hard, and people that care about the world society. And almost every one of them, after they finished their speech and walked off the stage, they come backstage and say to whoever was standing there, well, how did I do? And you think, why would a president of a country ask other people how they did after all they've accomplished? But they also all had a certain degree of humbleness. So as we think about ourselves as leaders and our panel, at all of you involved in discussions at your table. So can we begin with Arlene? I'm going to start at that end.
I think to be a leader, first of all, you must be a great listener and observer. So you have to observe the things, and after observing, try to get the ideas from the people who are with you, who are jointly facing the similar issue, and try to probe in the probable solutions. While discussion, you will be easily able to identify the people who are the part of the solution, who are the part of the problem. Then probably, then you have to work it out in a strategy to take the solution forward and try to convince the others. And because you are a leader by position. Generally in the government, we are leaders by position. So once a positional leader decides, then everybody follows. So once you make a view and then you decide, then probably it becomes easier and things happen.
Okay. So you were saying that you're a leader by position. In organizations, no matter who somebody is, the current thinking really all around the world is that everyone in an organization, in a sense, can be a leader or can think about him or herself as a leader. So I think it's both, where leaders are there because they have a position, and then they've also earned it through certain kinds of behavior in certain steps that they take. So I'm wondering if that would be part of your vision of a leader. That anyone in an organization, even if they don't have the position of the CEO, can demonstrate some leadership qualities?
You can always identify the people at various levels. Because in an organization, you have people at various levels, and they have to be leader in their own way. So
Yes.
being the topmost man is another thing, but being a leader in a specific group is another part of it. So you can always be leader for a smaller group. So you have to identify those leaders, and those leaders have certain qualities, and those qualities are to be shown up. These you have to help them in perfecting those qualities, giving them necessary tools by means of training on those subjects needed, and that is how you create more and more leaders in the organizations. And probably as they go up, certain leaders will be lost and certain leaders will make it up to the top.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can we hear your thoughts, please?
Well, I think the points that you've triggered off are certainly very relevant, and we understand that leaders are at every level. That's point number one, because I think it assumes that people take ownership for where they are in life and what they want to achieve. And when they demonstrate behavior which is not necessarily linear, not necessarily very narrow, then they are demonstrating behavior which is of a level of leadership. Now, in organizations, when we go up the organizational hierarchy, I think what differentiates a factory level worker to, let's say, the CEO of a company is effectively the impact that each has over the business and over a particular time frame. The factory worker, he is delivering a product every minute of the 8 hours that he's probably working, he or she is working. And therefore, the output of what that person is doing, it could be a factory worker, it could be a laborer building a house, for example. Their output is there for us to see and feel. Whereas the CEO is taking calls, deciding on issues which are going to have a very long-term bearing for this organization. So as we transit levels of leadership from the lower levels to higher levels, I think what you are actually transcending is you're looking at a time dimension which is very, very dramatically different. There's an Indian text which is called the Arthashastra. It was written thousands of years ago. And the first paragraph talks about the duties of a king. And it says, first and foremost, the duty of a king is to look after his people. And I think in that statement is encompassed everything. Because when you look after the people, you are making sure that the environment that you're actually creating, the enabling environment, the entire ecosystem, it will generate to a healthy population in the future. So you're not looking at the transaction. You probably are looking at the transaction also, but your overriding focus is that is my populace, is my country going to remain healthy into the future? It's like this. I may look very fit here and now, but you probably wouldn't know what problems I've got internally. I may be a very sick person, but I'm able to acquit myself here and now. Am I healthy is a question that you can ask, but you'll not know the answer to. Only I will know, because it's what I do, how I quit myself today, that will make, and if I'm a healthy person, then I'm ready to move into the future 5 years from now. But if I'm suffering from cancer or debilitating disease, and I have only 6 months to go, you'll never make out from here onwards. So I believe the role of the leader is to generate long-term health for the organization, for the country. It's almost in perpetuity. It cannot be a transactional thing.
And you're saying, I think that I hear you saying that a leader needs to do positive and good things for society?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I was part of a conversation when we were approaching the year 2000, and it was Time magazine, which is a global publication all over the world, had a panel of people. I was not on the panel, but I was in the audience. And the panel of people was supposed to select the person of the century. Who was the strongest leader in the 20th century? And they came out with an article And the person that was selected was Albert Einstein, but the scientist Albert Einstein. But a big part of the discussion was Adolf Hitler a leader? He certainly had a vision. He certainly had followers. He certainly made an impact. I would say he was not, and Time magazine could not end up putting him on the front cover and saying that he was the most powerful leader of the 20th century, although there were people on the panel, and there were about 30 people on the panel from all over the world. There were people who thought that he should have been named the strongest leader of the 20th century. So it could be quite controversial. Discussions can be quite controversial. Let's hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, leaders, of course, have to head an organization and lead his people. So what you said in your opening remarks, that relating to your people is the most important quality. A leader has to be in communication with them, with all the people that he is working with. One of the biggest problems with the leadership is that all of us think that we are irreplaceable.
Oh,
every leader.
That's very true. How many of you think you're irreplaceable? Be honest. Be honest.
It's just
nobody.
It's,
yeah.
What?
I'm so.
Oh.
Ah.
I mean, it's almost the same thing. I mean, we all think that we are going to be in this world forever and plan our life accordingly, that nothing will ever go wrong. But most leaders, most heads of organizations think that they are irreplaceable. They will always be there, and they don't want to give their powers to others, delegate powers, and so on. So this is the most important part of leadership, is to create the next generation. And that can happen only when you delegate responsibility as well as delegate authority. Because otherwise, if you are going to take all the decisions, your subordinates will be very happy to pass the buck and say, you decide everything. They will not take a decision. So the very important part of the leadership is to give responsibility to others, listen to them, support your juniors to take decision, to go forward, to learn responsibility. And I think that is an essential part for any organization to grow and to continue beyond your lifetime.
It's a really good point. And we were talking during the lunch break, and I asked you why you think people are so reluctant to share responsibility and share their
to some extent,
power.
To some extent they have a sense of insecurity. Okay, if you don't feel confident about yourself, really confident, then you don't want to divulge anything. You want to control everything, and that is true at least in India. In every political party we have. They are all single-person parties. They don't want to delegate anything to anybody else. So even right now, this year also, we have a new government, and that also is a one-man government.
Yeah, and there's a lot written and a lot of research on style of women leaders compared to style of men leaders. And I was reading a newspaper actually 2 months ago. I know that you can't see this, but it's an article that came out in June, and it said, "Powerful women are in demand in India." And the article said that there's a wide scramble search for women leaders throughout India. And the reason for it happening right now is apparently a law was passed, and you probably all know this, that by October of this year, every corporate board in India has to have at least one woman on it. How many people knew about that law?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I assume that that does not affect association boards quite yet, or does it? Does anybody know if it affects association boards?
I don't think so.
But eventually, if it's not affecting it now, I'm sure that it will. But it's a very interesting article, and it says the general chatter is, how many women names do you have on your list? So-and-so is already taken. There's a lot of pressure now scrambling for these women leaders because of this law. So, so the sense of diversity and inclusion is really part of the leadership skills and abilities and orientation of people in our society. And Arlene has been a very big champion for diversity and inclusion as part of the leadership skill set. So maybe you can address that and anything else you'd like to talk about.
Thank you. Well, I would, first of all, strongly underscore the comments that were made that leadership, there's both an opportunity for leadership that all of us have, whatever the position, whatever the role is, there's opportunity to look at things differently, to bring new ideas, to help solve problems. There's also positional leadership that carries some particular responsibilities. A couple that come to mind, I would agree strongly about being sure to really engage the talents and the perspectives. I think one of the most important roles of somebody who has a positional leadership by position is to really be very thoughtful. I like the quote by Gandhi, I would go beyond that. It's not only about working well with others, it's about taking the time to really understand the talents of others, to support those talents, to help develop them, and to engage them for the well-being of the organization and for all of the people involved. I think that's a very important role of someone in a leadership position. Another one is to be really thoughtful about helping to make sure that the organization's culture is one that's by design. Every organization has a culture. We talked a little bit yesterday about blame, about risk aversion, about whether it's a group of people who operate by protecting information in a silo or sharing information, whether it's a collegial environment, whether people feel that they can come and give their best, or the mindset is I'm coming and doing what's needed and then I leave. The culture of the organization, I think, is one that really should be by design, and that's the responsibility of the leader. And to your point about inclusion and diversity, Susan, there's a whole body of information that supports the fact that innovative thinking, being able to look at things differently, to be able to see opportunities, to be able to have a different perspective, really occurs when you surround yourself with folks who look at things a little bit differently than you do. And that might be because of the fact that you have a different cultural background. It might be because of gender. It might be because of age. It might be because of having different subject matter expertise. But the more that you have the opportunity to really create an environment where people can bring their best, share their ideas, the better insights, the better new thinking, ways to improve things, ways to really get the best value for the organization and everybody associated with it is likely to happen. I also heard some comments that I would agree with about that future focus. The things we're doing today are important to be well done, but we also need to have an eye about where we're going, and I think that's another important responsibility for a leader. And the last comment I'll make is one, you know, my background is speech-language pathology, and I do believe there's a reason why we are given 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's a challenge for me. I like to talk, but I think it's important for leaders to be good listeners, to really benefit from the ideas and the information, the insights of other people.
Thank you. You know, a big role in associations. Associations, I don't think yet, at least the ones that I am aware of, are very open and transparent organizations. I mean, typically at the association board meeting, when there are issues that are controversial or there's a lot of conflict, people in general seem to turn inward. So dealing with conflict and dealing with opinions that are very different from your opinion, or dealing with diversity of thought, is a real skill of leadership. And I saw a quote the other day that said, if two people are always thinking exactly the same, one of them is definitely redundant. So I think that that's true. You know, you want to get discussion and debate as part of your leadership role. The other issue that's been very prominent over the years in associations is who is the leader of the organization? Who is the leader in the association? Is it the staff, CEO? Is it the board of directors? And the common wisdom now, or conventional wisdom, is that it's really a partnership, and that it takes the leadership style of the boards and the board members and the leadership styles and abilities of the paid staff to work as a team. So wondering if there's any other thoughts you want to make before I ask the tables to come up with a leadership question for the panel. Does anybody?
I think I just want to, I think whereas the fundamental principles of leadership perhaps don't change over centuries.
Yes,
it remains,
I agree.
It's essentially the same. But I think the need or leadership skills, talent, capability required at different points in time is different. Leadership, like you said, we'll find millions of definitions. You open
That's
up Google,
right.
you know.
Yes.
I believe that in the times that we are living in now, I think there are some unique characteristics today. One is that the life cycles of businesses are becoming increasingly short. Businesses earlier on ran for 50, 60, 70 years. They seem to run forever. Today we see that all that has collapsed dramatically, largely by the advent of technology. I believe that that change that is actually taking place very rapidly in the environment requires responses which require leaders and people to be far more agile than they have ever been before. Entire business models have been turned on their head. You know, we've seen Encyclopedia Britannica, for example, you know, it ceased to exist because it didn't change. A very fantastic brand, BlackBerry, Nokia, they were leaders just about, you know, over a period of few years. And then they were almost no more. And they've been acquired and they've transformed themselves. And we are beginning to see a new brand of leadership emerge today. I mean, Google becomes we started off as a search engine. And that's all that we thought that Google could do has been transformed into any and everything. It's the platform for e-commerce. E-commerce is becoming a very, very large vehicle for doing business. And many retail organizations are finding to their own detriment that if they don't have an e-commerce platform, they probably will cease to exist. I think it's important to understand that the environment is changing very dramatically, and therefore one of the key roles of leadership is not only to be able to deal with this change, but to be able to anticipate it. I mean, the future is something we'll never know. We don't know what's going to happen in the next half an hour in the world. Yeah, right. But there are trends around us that if we are sensitive to, they'll point us in certain directions. And I believe it's the role of leadership, and leadership doesn't mean one person. It means a group of wise people within the organization at different levels, where you're able to pick up signals and create a direction for the organization or for the country. That if we move in this direction, then we move forward. I think the single biggest driver today, and I think there was some discussion at this panel just now, is around innovation. Innovation is turning everything on its head. Things that we think are going to remain forever for the next 5 years or 10 years, by a stroke of one brilliant idea that somebody had a conviction about, and others they always knew it but didn't exist. I think we've seen examples of it in the world around us. I believe that requires to happen. And I think one of the key roles of leaders, I think Professor has made this point very well, is also an ability for us to not only look at people in a construct which is slightly different. The time that when I started working, it was almost that you could carry on exactly with the same skill for the next 20 years, and it wouldn't matter, frankly. You grew incrementally. Today, the time spans of roles and jobs have changed dramatically. So every 2 to 3 years, you require your managers, your leaders within the organization to have skills which are entirely different. So people who are ready to learn, who are willing to transform themselves, has also enabled the transformation of the business. I think these aspects, dealing with ambiguity, being comfortable with change, and not saying why the hell can't things be constant. I don't think that's going to happen. That's something that we will need to gear up, for the future.
Okay. Time for questions. I was going to ask you to work at your tables and come up with some thoughts as a group, but I see that we have 8 minutes left, so that's not going to work. So if you could, I can't see you behind the podium there. Okay, go right ahead.
I just have one remark and one question to the panel. The remark, I think this is the big change, that leaders now come in for a certain, probably limited, or many times very limited time period. This has changed. My father's generation, they came into a job as a teacher, as a leader, as a politician, forever, open end. And this has changed, and yet we do have still leaders that don't know that yet. And that's why they're hanging on. We have one in Switzerland, Josef Blatter, in football. That's one example of a leader, and he doesn't understand what's happening to this. But that change is that you come into a corporation for a limited time period, for a limited job to fulfill, and to make sure that once you're going, everything is in order, the house is in order. So that's just a general thought. And the second one is a question to the panel. What, and that interests me, what would a global leader need? And we see the change in requirements, abilities, knowledge, understanding, networking, etc. But what would you say that comes to global leader in the future with all this globalization going on? Multinational, multicultural organization, institution, associations, and football clubs. So the question is, the question specifically is, global leaders in the future, what comes at them, and what do they have to train or prepare to be successful for that short time job that they get?
And from your question, it sounds like you think that global leaders of the future will need something different than...
It's a running process.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, let me have a go at it.
Yes.
I believe that one of the principal needs of a global leader, he's got to think global. He's got to look at talent from a perspective that talent in India, US, Japan, etc. What is the uniqueness of talent that is available across the globe, and where can I tap that talent? It cannot be, a global leader cannot have a narrow focus. He cannot be territorial or, I come from India, so it's got to be India focus. Point number one. He's got to be very, very comfortable with diversity, because you recognize that diversity is what will produce an organization which will actually move into the future. And it doesn't matter, it could be organization, it could be the World Health Organization, it could be any body which has a significant purpose going forward. I believe that that's the single most important aspect for a particular leader, to surround himself by people who come from different backgrounds, who have unique talents, and who are able to give perspectives which, like you very rightly mentioned, are different to what I necessarily I carry as a leader. very important aspect.
I would agree, and I would build and add. I think it's important, to the extent that any of us can, to really build our own skills, to be comfortable with ambiguity, to be nimble, to be flexible. My experience at this Congress has been wonderful. It's different than the experience I had last week at a Congress in the United States, from the experience I had a couple of months ago at the European Association Congress. So that ability to be flexible, to say, here in this environment, here with this group of people, this is the way that things are done. I need to be open to that, to respect it, to enjoy it, to be comfortable participating. So that kind of personal flexibility and nimbleness, I think, is very important as well.
Yeah. And I think that global leaders need to realize that learning takes place at all levels. You know, there isn't one culture that's so advanced compared to another one, that you learn from each other all the time. And in the world of associations, many people will say that associations, for example, in developing countries are not as advanced as associations in the US or in Europe. And I would say that's totally baloney. I mean, it is absolutely not so. And some of the most innovative, risk-taking, brilliant organizations that I have seen are operating in developing countries, and I think because there's a sense of urgency, they don't have the baggage that 100-year-old organizations have. You know, they don't have the so-called sacred cows, or we've always done it that way, so they're starting fresh and new. But I think a global leader needs to look for wisdom and brilliance from all cultures as they develop relationships. What were you
well, the global leader, to some extent, the way we see leaders these days, is emerges from the position very often. The position, somebody is in a position like the head of Microsoft. Just by reaching that level and the Microsoft becoming bigger and bigger, he becomes a global leader in some sense. Somebody who happens to be in a smaller organization, in spite of all his abilities, will never become global leader. So the position, if it really makes a person a leader in the sense. The true leaders that will change, will in some sense really influence the whole world without having a power or authority of, say, being a US president or something, will be coming from the literature or from philosophy and things like that. Where, you know, Mother Teresa was a global leader. George Bush will never consider, at least I would not consider him as a global leader. Okay, so the people who
let's not go there with George Bush.
Let's not do that individually.
Well, there's two George Bushes.
Yes, of course.
One I think is a global.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, one could be. But Mother Teresa, definitely, we would say, I think most people would agree, had influence which would transcend all ways, countries and borders and so on. So the leaders could be somewhere else other than what we read in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, certainly. Could we take one more question? Because we have one more minute, so anybody else have a question? In the back there.
In the back.
In the back?
Yes.
Yes, Susan.
Yes.
I think it's a very interesting subject. I myself, my name is Marcel Vissers. I'm the editor-in-chief of Headquarters Magazine based in Brussels and Headquarters Asia Pacific based in Singapore. I myself, I'm very interested in this subject because it's part of motivation psychology. And I have a few ideas about leadership. In motivation psychology, they speak about good and bad leaders. Just to give you an answer on, is Hitler a good leader? Is that a world leader? Everything depends on values. When you kill 50 million people, I think you are a bad leader. when you give a future to 50 million people like Nelson Mandela, I think you are a good leader. Everything depends on values in a community. Another thing is, I missed a bit the word responsibility. A leader has to be a strong person, physically and mentally, because he has to take everyday responsibility. Not everybody can take responsibility. And it is not because you cannot do it that you are not good. No. Some people have these strengths. And a real leader, he has to work a lot, a lot. Another thing is, you never can say there is one type of leadership. No. In different situations, you need different types of leaderships. Yes, and one leader, he has to combine a lot of good qualities. In one situation, and that I think you can recognize the best leaders, when there is a very, very conflict in a company, and then you really will see who is the best leader, who can manage the conflict, who can manage the people, and bring a new solution for the future. And in another situation, you have to like somebody who is supporting the success, and to support success and really to value success is not an easy thing. So leadership, in my opinion, is a very, very not an easy subject. We have to think about it and see it in different situations and in different societies.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That was very well said. And on that note, because this is blinking right in front of us, I want to thank this esteemed panel and thank all of you for your participation. And I hope the next time there's a session on leadership, we have more time to explore it and go in depth, because strong leadership will be saving our planet. We're at that level. So it's great to have the opportunity to begin to discuss this very, very critical issue. And again, thank you all very much.